Welcome to Should Have Listened to My Mother. I'm Jackie Tantillo, your host. This week, we're going to have a chat with Jennifer Lamonica, who is a chiropractor, acupuncturist, nutritionist. She has written a book, The Art and Science of Face Reading, about face morphology, reading one's face and connecting with what's going on inside in an effort to heal from the inside out. Without further ado, as I say, I am going to give Jennifer a call. And she should be ready to speak. Let's see what happens. We usually giggle every time we're together, the two of us. So. Hi, Jennifer.
Yes.
Hi, it's Jackie.
Hi.
How are you? Are you in a nice, cozy spot?
Yes, I am.
Oh, Jennifer Lamonica, welcome to Should Have Listened to My Mother. I was just telling my listeners how you and I usually giggle so much when we're together. So I have a feeling that a lot of that is going to come out in the next couple of minutes or so. How have you been?
Thank God, good. Faring well during this whole COVID thing. But, what are you going to do? Life goes on.
It does. The sun comes up every morning.
Right.
We can't let that, we can't disappoint the sun. So we are here to find out, because I've known you for so long, and my mom and dad went to see you a million years ago, it seems, and you pretty much know all of the siblings, I think, maybe except for my brother or something. So there's there's an alarm on my phone. What do you know? Hold on. So anyway, I don't even know your mom's name. I've heard stories of her. Rose?
Rose.
Oh. And what did you call your mom growing up? Was she mom or mommy or?
I think all of the above, but Mom was mostly the name. And occasionally I would call her Mamacita.
And did you grow up in Mineola, or where did you grow up on Long Island?
No, I grew up in Corona, Queens.
No way. Oh, that's great. That's fantastic. What a beautifully ethnic neighborhood that is.
Totally.
And how many siblings?
So I'm the oldest of four.
Okay.
So I have two sisters and one brother. We grew up on 52nd Avenue, right down the block from the helicopter pad at the World's Fair.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so we had a lot of experiences running down there to meet and greet all the Beatles and Lloyd Bridges and all.
No way.
Yeah, they would come in on the helicopter, and all the kids on the block would, scream, "Hey there!" And we would all run down and run across 111th Street and all stand there. I got my glossy picture of Lloyd Bridges. I was a big fan of that show, Sea Hunt.
Did you see the Beatles too?
I did.
So how old were you, around-ish?
So I think it was 1964, and I was born in 53, so 11 years old.
Wow. How fun is that?
Oh, my goodness, it was crazy.
Did you go to the World's Fair?
All the time. All the time. We were down the block from the World's Fair, and so what we would do is sneak in, and we had this whole thing going on.
Everyone snuck in when they were kids somewhere.
Right. Well, we would go up to the Terrace on the Park restaurant in the heliport, and then we would come down through the service exit elevator and then go straight into the park. I mean, they caught up with us, a few times, but basically it was an easy entry. We just did that, and we would go every single day.
So for someone who's not from the East Coast, specifically New York State, right outside the Midtown Tunnel onto the Long Island Expressway, you drive by this beautiful area. I mean, it's been neglected for some time, but it's quite a special place. Can you tell us a little bit about the World's Fair? Because I remember staying in the little playground with our dad, the three younger kids. We didn't get to go in because I guess we were too young.
Oh, wow. Well, it was wonderful because it was so innovative at the time, and we were so interested in the rides and what we could do. But what happened was they built this whole big World's Fair, and the most poignant memory I have is the Ford exhibit where you were allowed to drive a car. So they would let you get into this car it wasn't, you weren't really driving, but it was like a ride, and it was on this track, and you would go around and would go in, and the biggest problem was the long lines. But my girlfriend Liz, she was very, very aggressive, and she would say, "Mom, Mom, Mom." She would make believe she was lost, and everybody would let us all go through. Get our mother.
Not only did you sneak in, you were deceptive and cut the lines.
Exactly. We had so much fun. It was just, I really am grateful for that. The difficulty on the block was that everybody was stealing parking places. The people who lived there wanted to park their car in front of their home when they got home from work. So I remember my father going to work and coming home, and then all of us kids would get garbage cans and beach chairs, and we would sit in the spot in front of the house so that no one could come in, and it got pretty argumentative at times.
Oh, my goodness.
But it was what we did, it's just what we did. It's how I grew up. I didn't really have any other experience, so I was very familiar with that, and I mean, we had it wired. We used to bring our own cups, and we'd put our hand behind the stall and get soda.
Oh, my gosh. Now, wait a minute. So this is all when you were a little kid. This isn't how you are today.
Yeah, I was a criminal then.
And your mom has no idea that you were doing this, right?
Well, she actually did.
Oh, my gosh.
She really did, yeah.
So,
but, she was a mother of 4 children, and the older ones were really had a little bit more free reign, of course. So myself and my brother were able to kind of roam the streets more than the little ones, and she was home with the little ones.
So tell me a little bit more about Rose. Like when you close your eyes and think of your mom, can you see, sense, and hear her in a specific place?
Oh, yeah. She was always ironing in the kitchen, listening to Cousin Brucey on WABC.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah, she loved to listen to music while she was doing whatever she was doing, in the family chores. She was home with us until I was 12. My father had a very significant heart attack at 38 years old and nearly lost his life. And he was made to go home, and he couldn't go to work for 2 years. So my mother had to eventually go to work. She was too proud to accept welfare. His mother's a very hard-working woman and really smart. She worked in a private laboratory. She was a chemist, and she really provided for us incredibly. So, the kind of childhood that I had, I did not feel like I was deprived because everybody was so imaginative in the way that we dealt with it. But we just completely went by her instructions. So, I cleaned the house on Saturday morning while she was at work. I used to put the meals in at night before she came home. But she would cook every Sunday all the meals for each day. And, she was like being a chemist. She did her chemistry, and she cooked just like her chemistry. Ding, 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 everything was going off, and she had it all, organized, and everybody had their chores to do, and we had a really wonderful experience. I would never have known that we weren't poor, so to speak. Like in today's standards, that would be considered poor. I remember crying when I couldn't get two pennies for candy when I was little, but we had so much fun all the time. It was just a wonderful, wonderful childhood, and it's thanks to her. She's always very smart but quiet. Like I'm a chatterbox. I can talk to anybody or anything. My father was the same way, but my mom was very quiet, contemplative, very bright, but when she said something, you listened.
Did she go to college?
She did, and she went to college at St. Mary of the Woods in Indiana because my grandfather wouldn't allow her to go to any public school with, it was an all-women school, so she was forced to go there, and she did not finish college because her mother took ill and she had to come home and take care of her. But after my father died, which was young, he was only 52, I had convinced her to go back to school, and she did. She finished her college degree and went on for her master's.
So you convinced her to go back to school. How great is that?
I think I did. The memory is foggy. I'm sure it was a desire of hers, but, I always recognized her intelligence and recognized her brilliance, so I did a lot of encouraging with her.
And what did she study? Sciences?
Yeah, she studied the sciences. She was a medical technology major. I don't know if you know what that is, but the medical technologists are the people who do the blood testing.
Mm-hmm.
But their degree is in biochemistry, basically. So, she went to C.W. Post College, and she took her courses. And, as a matter of fact, I still have her notebooks. Her handwriting was exquisite. You know how they used to write?
Beautiful penmanship.
Oh, my goodness, exquisite. Just so wonderful. And very, very bright, my mom. She rarely took us to medical doctors because she used to read the Merck manual, and whenever there was an illness, she would figure out what to do, and that was it. We were just very fortunate in my household that she was that way.
Didn't you do medical technician work?
Yes, I did. I followed in her path, and I went to college also for the, they call it a medical biology degree, and I got that. And then after working a couple of years, I decided that it was time to do something different, and that's when I became a chiropractor. And I went back to school, but that degree had set me aside from all the other people because you're really taught to be a diagnostician in that degree. You have to learn how to read the lab tests, how to evaluate them, and understand what they represent. When I went to school, I actually started teaching medical doctors and chiropractors and everything how to do that, how to do the lab diagnosis stuff. And I still to this day, people call me, for advice on their lab tests. So it's.
Oh my gosh, the fruit does not fall far from the tree. She went to school. That's admirable with 4 kids. That's pretty impressive, and no husband. Did she ever loosen up? I mean, she had a lot of responsibilities. So what, did she have girlfriends? Would she go out or?
So she had 2 really close girlfriends. And one of them had 6 children, and one of them had 2 children. But the one that had 2 children lived in New Jersey, so she didn't see her as much. But they were all, pretty smart people. And the one with the 6 children, we spent a lot of time together. And I remember, she and my father and her girlfriend Josephine and her husband Armand, they were always over the house having coffee, and they used to say. So they'd have their coffee, and they'd have like an Entenmann's crumb bun or something like that, And whatever they did, they played cards, they talked, they played games, and and the kids, we would all just talk and hang out with each other. But
10 kids together, 6 and 4.
Yeah.
How fun is that?
Yeah, it's total fun. And growing up in Corona, the houses were attached where I lived. So the backyards weren't separated. They were separated by fences, but mostly, it was like you could just go from one yard to the next and hang out. And so it was like a very amazing community life. We used to sit on the stoop when it was hot. There was no air conditioner. We were outside at night, and that was the thrill. You're in your pajamas outside.
I remember those days.
Yeah, because it was so hot inside. We would hang out.
Your mom lost your dad. Did you ever see her crumble emotionally, or was she always composed and?
No, she lost it. I mean, she really, really, really lost it. That was. It wasn't only just losing my father at the time, but she worked in that private laboratory with a woman who was from Romania, who had a private laboratory, and kept my mother there, who was working there. But she kept only my mother, and then she fired everybody else and rehired people. And it became like this family, and it was a lot of technicians and technologists from all over the world. And I actually got a job there, which is how I wanted to become a medical technologist, because this woman, Mrs. Remetier, God rest her soul, she was, she really befriended my mother, and she knew the circumstances of my mother's finances. But my mother sacrificed her relationship with me at the lab because that other woman had lost her child, and she took on to me like a parent. And she actually paid for my college education as long as I worked 40 hours a week in the lab. And I did everything for her. You know, I used to, I don't know, do her shopping and clean her house and work in the lab and do all that stuff. And we all became very close. But just about the same time that my father passed away, this woman passed away. So, she was hit over the head with a hammer. It was just absolutely horrible. And I know that my mother relied on me a lot, being the eldest, and so it was difficult to see her go through all that she went through, but she, she rallied, but not without psychological pain. I mean, she really had a hard time. And that was when, I decided, I had gotten a job in a hospital in addition to these other jobs that I had. I was always a hard worker. And so I took her on a trip to Italy. And I'll never forget, we go to Italy. And we're walking through the streets, and she says, "Oh, Firenze." You know that Firenze is Florence.
Firenze, yeah, si.
Yeah, Firenze, right. She goes, "We're from there." I said, "What?"
Not until she's walking through Firenze.
She never knew that Firenze and Florence were the same.
Oh, my gosh.
So it
That's
was
okay.
so funny. But, my ancestry is Italian, and it hails from different places. Calabria down south, and Potenza, which is out of Naples, and then Torino, which is up north, and Firenze, Florence.
She must have been in heaven in Florence.
Oh, my God, it was wonderful. It was just wonderful. And I think it was very healing for her to be there. She had never really traveled abroad, and the furthest she had gone from home was on her honeymoon to Niagara Falls, and so...
That was a big trip for the honeymoon. I think my parents went to Niagara Falls, too.
Right? That's what they did at the time. There's cultural similarities to certain people, and you just feel warmth when you're around that. And, that's how I felt with your parents. I just fell in love with them from the first time I met them.
They were pretty great. They put up with a lot with us.
Well, I'll never forget what your mother said to me. She goes, "You're going to meet all of my children." She goes, "And you're going to love them." And it's true.
Oh, my gosh. Well, Linda is the inspiration for this podcast, so she's definitely had lasting effects on all of us, that's for sure.
Yeah.
She's pretty great. But here we are, where it should have listened to my mother. My guest is Jennifer Lamonica, and if you ever need a chiropractor or a nutritionist or acupuncturist or just a beautiful soul, she's in Mineola, New York, and just very, very special. Your mom, you said she loved to cook. She used to listen to music. Did you guys used to go to the beach growing up, or was she happy by the sea?
We went to the beach all the time. We went to the beach all the time. That was the summer fun. And she had a house. We had a house in Rocky Point. I don't know if you know where that is. It's on the north shore of Long Island. Mm-hmm. And that was like the whatever monies they could put together. They bought this house. It was a bungalow for $8,000, and it was quite a shambles. And we would go out there and fix it up. And my mother always made it like a game. Like we would just have fun. As a matter of fact, I remember driving, and we had a station wagon. We would be driving in the car, and my sisters and I and my brother would make believe that we were holding our breath till we got to Rocky Point. Of course we didn't.
Oh, I love it. There's something about being by the sea. Having grown up on Long Island, there's so much water.
That's right.
It's such a big part of our lives.
So big. And, one of the things that I don't know if I mentioned it, but my mother was very wise. There's a certain kind of intelligence that comes from a book, but there's also this other kind of intuitive intelligence, and she had that. So when I was struggling with life decisions, I would ask her, and I knew that she would steer me right. And just recently, I was remembering her advice to me when I had bought this house in Glenhead, and and I bought the other house in Mineola. And what I did was my sister and her husband had bought the house in Mineola with me because they just got married and they couldn't afford to buy a house alone. So we bought it together. And I was staying in Manhattan and living and kept the office in Mineola. And what happened was, after 2 years of doing that, my sister and her husband decided they had to move out, which was not the plan. So that left me strapped with, an entire house mortgage, which I wasn't prepared for, as well as right before that, I bought a house in Glenhead, and I had said to my sister 6 months prior, "Are you going to stay here, or are you, what's the plan?" "Oh, we can't go anywhere." So they said they were staying there, and then 6 months later, they decide they're going to move out. I looked at my mother. I said, "I don't know what to do. I have to sell something. I can't afford to do this." I was a new chiropractor with all these expenses. And she said, "Don't sell it." Like this, just like that. And like I told you, she's a woman of little words. So I struggled, and I kept it. And I really, 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 really struggled. But guess what happened? I ended up having those two houses, and then I was able to transfer that into another house, and then into another house, and I bought the house in Cutchogue.
She's a very smart woman.
Very smart woman. And but wise,
Yeah,
Like
very wise.
Yeah, she just had this sense about what to do and what not to do, and I always felt, and I still to this day, my mother's 92, God bless her, she's still alive, and I still know that I can call her and ask her opinion on something, and settle myself, because I know that she'll guide me right. She still has the wits about her.
At 92, how wonderful is that? And that's something that I miss so much. And I'm in my studio. I have pictures of my mom and my dad everywhere, and I still talk to them as though they're right here with me all the time. And I still get wonderful advice.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And we're very lucky, because not everybody had that experience or has that experience.
Having met your parents, I can understand that a little thing called heaven and earth would not stop them.
Yeah, definitely not. Did you have, being the eldest, because you're the groundbreaker for all the kids,
Right.
that's kind of hard. Did you talk to your mom about personal things, feminine things? Was she an activist? Was she interested in politics?
She wasn't necessarily interested in politics, but she had her opinions about what she felt was right, wrong, moral, immoral, things like that. And being the oldest child, I kind of took her through the paces, because I grew up in a time when, not necessarily the 60s, because in the 60s I was still quite young. I mean, I was born in 53, so in the 60s were my teen years, but still not, not. She wouldn't let me go to Woodstock, is what I'm saying.
In a word.
And I was all ready to go, and But my father, interestingly enough, he said, "Here, let's try marijuana together."
What?
So yes, they were not like what you would call scared of things, but they gave us caution, but they were really adventurous in a certain way.
Did your mom do it too with you?
No, she didn't do it. She didn't. She said that she had tried it with my father and didn't like it, and I tried it and I didn't have a good experience, and I was grateful for that, because whatever it was that he had, I was tripping. It was crazy.
Crazy dad here. This is wild. I never knew this side of you. But how cool is that? What a great environment. So do you think he was smoking pot all the time?
No, I didn't. I just...
He wanted to do it for your safety.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I don't think he was a pot-smoking guy. And they didn't drink much either, but my mother we had a cherry tree, a Queen Anne cherry tree in the yard, and she used to make this sort of cherry liqueur with it, and you would eat one cherry and you were buzzing.
I can imagine your father going to buy pot somewhere. These little details How cool. Oh my gosh. Hey, I'm going to smoke it with my daughter this afternoon.
Right, exactly. But, I'm so grateful for that, because if it was my intention to do it, it could have turned out bad, and he protected me.
That is very neat.
Yeah. And I remember when I had a boyfriend for like maybe 7 or 9 years, and I decided, after college and everything, I wanted to go to Europe, and we were on again, off again, on again, so we were off. And I went to Europe, and I met this man. It was a German man. And within 6 weeks, he was back in America. And he stayed at my house. And I remember my mother saying, okay, I think you should stay in separate bedrooms. And my father said, no, Rose, let her be, because I don't want her doing it in the car.
That's pretty progressive.
Yes,
Very progressive.
Very progressive.
Oh, the sight of your father envisioning his daughter in a car with a guy he doesn't really know. That's kind of wild. Wow. What an interesting mix your parents were.
Yeah. My father was very bright also, but he never really finished school, and he became a butcher. So he was like the guy in the neighborhood that gave all the meat away to the nuns and the priests.
I was going to say, he was probably feeding the neighborhood.
Yeah, he did. And, I know it's about my mom, but his name is Anthony, and we never knew who was going to be at the table, because he would meet people that didn't have money, and he would invite them home for a meal, And my mother was very tolerant. She would just, participate.
It's as though you're watching a movie listening to these stories, because it's so much of this seems from the past, our past.
Right.
And I'm not just talking about the timeline of your parents, but these are the things that are really important. Not only the community and your neighborhood and your brothers and sisters. It's just being human, and watching out for others is what makes us stronger, I think.
Absolutely.
And you are taking care of people all the time, every minute. That's all you do is take care of people.
Right. But I think I had some good role models.
You always will get when you give, I believe. Right? You'll always get.
Right. But it's just, I feel very fortunate to have had these parents.
Did you have a different relationship with your parents than your younger siblings?
I think so, because I had my mother and dad for 12 years before the bad stuff started happening. Like when my father got his first heart attack, he was 38 years old, and then he was bedridden for 2 years, and then he recovered, and then he died at 52. But there was a lot of struggle, in the family. So I felt like I had like the sort of Leave It to Beaver childhood, or whatever you call it, Donna Reed, any of those things, because both parents, my mother was home, my father worked, and, it was just a typical childhood, like American childhood. And we were ethnically also, having Sunday dinners with Grandma and Grandpa and all the different cousins, and everybody was together. And so we managed, even though we're fifth-generation American, we managed to keep the Italian influence in the family.
Oh, those big Italian Christmases and Thanksgivings and Christmas Eve.
Absolutely.
Oh, they're so much fun.
They really were, You try as a parent to have your children have that, but, it's different.
How much of your mom influenced the way you raised Danny, your son?
A lot. I mean, I could call her, but my mother was always encouraging independence, so some things were unequivocally no. But other things were, well, see how you feel about that, or see what you would do, or watch it. My son Daniel is adopted, and the thing that my mother said to me that I'll never forget, she goes, "You'll have a good life," she says, "because you won't be fooled by genetics."
Wow, that's pretty powerful.
Right?
And yet she was willing to give you your space and keep her distance in order for you to figure it out. Most parents are like, do it this way, you know. She was
Right.
giving in that sense. That's a pretty powerful statement.
But there was a certain kind of strictness that they had that you knew not to go past a certain point. You just didn't say things inappropriately, or you didn't do things inappropriately. I mean, I remember my mother and dad would just sort of lay the law down, and you knew not to cross that line. Whereas I think a lot of people today, they don't have that kind of boundary.
It's quite different now, actually. And I was like, how did that? Because for the most part, my dad kept his mouth shut, and he listened, and Linda basically, you know, dealt with not little day-to-day things, getting the homework done, cleaning the house. But man, my dad would have to say one word, and we knew we never went an inch further.
That's right.
It's very different now. Very different.
Yeah.
So how did you decide, when you decided to become a chiropractor, did your mom give you advice or suggest anything?
No, what happened was I was working in two hospitals at the time, North Shore University Hospital and Winthrop University Hospital. And I had two full-time jobs, and I used one of the salaries to pay off my student loans. And whatever I had left from what I didn't get from Dr. Remissier. And so I had decided, I didn't really decide, but I was working in the lab, and I kind of worked in every department I could. And one of the bosses over at the hospital said to me, listen, you better do something different because you're not getting my job.
Oh, my gosh. That's terrible.
She was the supervisor of the entire lab. And she said, you are really bright, and there's no place for you to go from here except at the bench, like working on the bench. And so what happened was there were a bunch of interns that used to come down to the laboratory, and I would teach them how to read the microscope and figure out certain things, or read the blood test. And they would come down and ask my opinion with diagnosing while I was working at the hospital, the interns. And a lot of the interns had come from Guadalajara, Mexico school, so we were talking a lot, and they said, why don't you become a medical doctor? And, I thought about it, and then one of the doctors who was a coordinator between Mexico and America was Dr. Rodriguez, and he gave me this opportunity to apply to Guadalajara. So I applied, I got in, and then I threw my back out. And what happened was I realized now that as a chiropractor many years ago that was fear. I was afraid to go to Mexico on my own.
Oh, Jennifer.
Yeah, and I threw my back out really badly. And when I did it, here's where my mother comes in. My mother says to me, why don't you go to Sandy Goodman over there in Forest Hills? Let him take care of your back. And so I did, and he was a chiropractor because the MDs wanted to do surgery, and it wasn't a surgical case. So I went to this Dr. Goodman, and he was doing something called applied kinesiology, and my mind was blown. I mean, I just couldn't believe the results that he was getting with these muscle testing and how he could know what was going on with my body. So I started to explore chiropractic, and simultaneously with that, one of the teachers that I had in CW Post for the Med Tech program, she was, I was in an internship there, and she calls me up and says, what are you doing with your life now? I hadn't heard from her in years, and she says, I just got accepted to chiropractic school, why don't you come?
This is not coincidence.
Right. So I did, and I got accepted, and I wasn't in the same class with Gail, but, she's the one who had called me and said, why don't you come? I was in the following class. By the time I got my junk together, I had to apply to get in. And I went to school there, and my mother was happy that I was doing that. I wasn't living at home. I had an apartment near the school, and I was doing everything, but I would come home and do my laundry and do all the stuff. And she was quite intrigued with the program, my mom, because she knew all the, she knew organic chemistry, she knew regular chemistry, she knew all those courses. So we would have talks about it, and I would eat dinner, Sunday, and then I'd go back to school.
Well, that's pretty great. So your mom laid the little path for you, and what happened with your back? Did the chiropractor fix your back?
Well, as soon as yes, exactly, fix my back. But what was most important was he realized that the fear had caused my coccyx to tuck, which caused my back to go out, and it was really a fear expression that caused it to go out. And as soon as we revealed that, and I realized that I wasn't going to go, my back got better.
Are fear and stress the same thing?
Not really, but they play into each other. They work in different ways in the body, but this is an actual, like when a puppy is happy, they wag their tail, but when they're scared, they tuck it. So I had actually tucked my tail, which then changed the whole relationship with my back and caused me to be vulnerable.
Well, I totally believe all of that. There's definitely a correlation between the emotional and physical aspects, and I believe the two parts play a role in our well-being. My guest is Jennifer Lamonica, and I'd like to spend a few minutes talking about your book entitled The Art and Science of Face Reading, Face Morphology. When did you finish writing it?
It was published in 2019. It was a 5-year program of writing, but what happened was I've been studying with a man by the name of Dr. Gerald Epstein, God rest his soul, and he is an MD psychiatrist. And I studied face morphology with him, and when I first started, which was back in 1985, I was in a class that he had designed for a group of us that were chiropractors. And one of the chiropractors was the one that turned us on to this guy because he was married and he was having difficulties in his marriage. They'd gone to all different therapists, all of which said that they should get a divorce. But he wasn't satisfied, so he found this Dr. Gerald Epstein, and Jerry had said to him, "This is your face, this is her face. These are the things that are different. Choose to accept them or get out of the marriage." And once they realized that, they decided to accept the nature of each individual. So they're still together today. And when Michael, who's the chiropractor that turned me on to this, said, "This is something I really want to learn," and he decided to do it. So I went to classes with Dr. Jerry. We all took the class together, and then after about, I don't remember, 6 months or a year of classes, and he says, "Okay, now go out and use it." And I did. And I used it with all my patients. And then years later, I went back to him and I said, "What do I do now?" And he goes, "All right, you come back to study." And I did study with him, and I realized that the face morphology is the outer expression of what's going on the inside of the body. And that this entire system that he was doing was really a system of Kabbalah, which is a way of receiving the word in the Jewish tradition. So it was a 4,500-year-old experience that I started to become more entrenched in and engrossed in. So what I ended up doing is taking everything and rewriting it myself. So really the writing part took about 2 years, but the process was about 5 years.
Decades of studying. So
yes.
Congratulations. That's
Thank
pretty
you.
great.
That's another thing that I had like a little bit with my mom, because she was very intuitive, and I don't know necessarily that she looked at the face, but she knew the gestalt of people. She would look at them and get a sense about who they were, and, have you ever watched the movie Moonstruck?
Yes, of course.
Right. So, when he comes in and I don't know, Olympia Dukakis says to Vince Gardena, what are you saying? He goes, "I'll say no more." That's how I remember. I said nothing. I'll say no more. That's how I remember my mother. Like an eye glance, an understanding, but she didn't really speak about it. but you knew what she was thinking or what she was saying.
Always. It was like when we brought a boyfriend home, we knew what our father
Right. It was like there was no language necessary.
What a wonderful time spent with you, Jennifer Lamonica. I'm so glad. I said, after all these years of knowing you, really wonderful to get to know your mom a little bit, because I know she's always held a special place in your heart and your life.
Absolutely. Yes. Thank you, Jackie.
I'm Jackie Tantillo, and this is Should Have Listened to My Mother.